Um, it is not all based on, it's not all, I don't want to oversimplify. It's rural, white, poor too. Appalachian, I spent time in places like Carrollton, Georgia, that were as tough as any of my South and West Side's neighborhoods, sometimes tougher. But we value different lives differently. And I think the challenge in rooms like this, that by definition you're not in Salt Lake City at the St. Regis without some breaks along the way, a lot of hard work, but some breaks, some privilege, is do we care about our neighbors' kids as much as we care about our own? And I think as a nation, we all care passionately about our own kids. We don't care enough about our neighbors' kids, whether they be black or Latino or poor or whatever it might be, or rural white. And until we, go back to your original, until we value human capital everywhere, until we see genius in every community, in every neighborhood, I always say talent's a lot more evenly spread than opportunity. Until opportunity meets that talent fully, we're not there. I'll go, not to further complicate, not to go off a tangent, but when my kids were being shot in Chicago, I thought it was because we didn't value black and brown kids. And I thought, I hate to say this, I thought it would take white kids being killed to see something happen around gun control. And then we had the Sandy Hook Massacre, Newtown, Connecticut, which saw 20 white babies and 5 teachers and a principal killed, and that was the hardest day of my time in D.C., and the president said probably the hardest day of his life, his presidency, and he dealt with the hardest issues on the planet. And the fact that we got 0 done, 0. We got an F in terms of gun control past that blows me away. Obviously, we're coming off of Las Vegas, which is the most horrific shooting in our nation's history. So it's a long way of saying we definitely we value black and brown lives less than white lives. It's unquestionable to me. But I don't think I know we don't value many people's lives as much as other countries. Not to go on too long, my wife is from Australia. They had a massacre from her home state of Tasmania, Port Arthur, in 1996. They changed gun laws right after that. It was actually a conservative government did it. And there hasn't been one mass shooting in 20 years in Australia, not one. That's the gift that Australia gave to its kids. We average a mass shooting every day in our country. So we don't value our lives in ways that other countries do. Last example, pre-K. Pre-K is ubiquitous in many countries. I was in the Netherlands last summer. Every 4-year-old has access, and they're moving to every 3-year-old. And when I talked about millions of kids here not having access, they honestly sort of thought I was lying. They really couldn't comprehend. And they finally said, why don't Americans value your children? And I didn't have a good answer. So there are lots of, this is complicated. It's multi-layered. Race is a huge part of it, but it's deeper than race.
So the Gates Foundation just announced almost $2 billion investment in K-12 schools. And we've been spending a lot of time today talking about the alignment and relevance of learning to careers. And I'm wondering if you could share a point of view about whether or not the purpose of education is to prepare kids for industry, or if there's something else.
I think there are lots of purposes. So part of my passion for education has always been in my mind, just growing up as part of my mother's program, that kids who got an education, who she was able to get to college, they were able to break the cycle of poverty in one generation. Like they were able to go from not having any money to raising families with some stability. So that part of, again, there may be other ways to break cycles of poverty, but I don't know how you do that without education. Like that for me is a fundamental building block. So that one is hugely important to me. I do think particularly now, and it's not new, but I think it's sort of come to the service, in part reaction to a black president, frankly, and in part reaction to the current president, is our democracy is fraying on the edges. And I would love to have many more families of color and white families be economically secure and have good jobs. I would love to spend time in McDowell County, West Virginia, and despite coal's not coming back, and what are we doing for those? And no one, Republican or Democrat, has come with, how are we retraining there? And we all have to own that collective, that collective failure. But we have to find ways to knit our democracy back together. I think education, K-12, higher ed, has a unique opportunity to do that. It's fascinating. We had White House. We did polls. If you put people who are center left to far left together in a room, they all tend to go further left. If you put folks who are center right and far right in a room together, they all go far right.
That's interesting.
And our middle's collapsing, and our ability to compromise is it's getting tougher. And I think democracy is a fantastic institution if you're willing to compromise. If you're not willing to compromise, democracy breaks down, and our middle's collapsing. So it's a long way of answering, can you in education get people from communities, different backgrounds, different ethnicities, urban, rural, can you mix them? Virtually, technology, can we start to see our common humanity? And the goal not being to convert people to our way of thinking, but just to build some trust, to build some understanding, to build some empathy. And so I think education has a critical role to play now, maybe more than ever, in helping people get outside their skins, move in uncomfortable spaces, start to build relationships and trust with people who look different, believe different, live different. And if we don't do that K to 12, if we don't do it in higher ed, once we become adults, we all self-segregate. We all go to our collective corners. It's almost too late. So I think there's a unique opportunity and desperate need for education to find ways to build those bridges and build those divides, or bridge those divides.
You know, when I was a little girl, I was introduced to the metaphor of America as a melting pot. And as a 50-something, yes, I said it, woman, I see it more...
I'm 30-something. So.
I see it more as a quilt, where it's a quilt that has different fabrics and different colors and different textures, all required to make that quilt, when it comes together, when it's woven together, something that gives warmth and comfort. And I think we've moved away from celebrating difference and what it could do for us to trying to meld everybody into some amalgam that doesn't mean anything to anyone. And as I think about the hyper-segregation that is happening in charter schools, in public schools, in private schools, I'm wondering how we're going to appreciate the different textures and the different colors, and even have an instinct to weave it all together.
Yeah. So I'm a big fan. I mean, not easy. You know, Skype is great for kids. There are all kinds of ways to build bridges, you know, across the United States, across the globe. I'm a huge believer in sort of service and community service, and having kids from the youngest ages, you know, serve and to do that together, and a little less about singing Kumbaya, but more about, can we paint a school together? Can we clean up a neighborhood together? Can we help to build a house together? And when people do those kinds of things, it cuts through lots of other stuff. And you know, I would love to see on a voluntary basis a year of national service. You know, make that again, make that an opportunity for everybody. And I want to see more, you know, disadvantaged kids be the doers of service, not the recipients of service. And I think it's just a healthy part of growing up, is contributing to your community. And traditionally, it's the private school kids tutoring the you know, public school kids, and that's cool. We need that, but public school kids can tutor other public school kids, and they can work together on a, you know, community project. And so again, I think schools have a unique opportunity if they're willing to go some other place and do some things they won't. Get proximate. And just right now in Chicago, it's interesting, fantastic. It's actually a faith-based school. A buddy of mine runs on the west side where there's a lot of violence, and their last 2 games have been canceled because the teams from the suburbs wouldn't come in and play them. They feared for their safety, and you sort of get it, but nothing's going to happen on a football field. And what they don't understand is these kids are living with this level of fear every single day. They can't escape it. So for you not to be willing to get on a bus and play a football game and go back to your safety and comfort, you're not willing to be, you know, how does that make those kids feel that these guys are too scared to come to our neighborhood and play? So there's a massive opportunity to build a bridge there, or to further stigmatize and demonize and alienate, and again, have them understand how separate and how different they are. So it's a massive missed opportunity.
So I'd like to turn our attention to higher ed a little bit, if I might. And we received some questions from you all, and I'd like to share a couple of those. Here's the first. The Obama administration oversaw the largest expansion of federal lending to higher education, with over 1 million students defaulting on student loans each year, and the staggering fiscal and opportunity cost for the federal loan program growing each year. What would you have done differently? Do you think the U.S. government has replaced mortgage companies as predatory lenders? And if so, what should the policy shift be to fix the problem?
So lending increased, but also so did grants. We had an additional $40 billion for Pell Grants, which I'm pretty proud of, without going back to taxpayers for a nickel. Went from 6 million Pell recipients to 9 million. The biggest, lots of things I'm proud of, lots of failures, lots of things we didn't get done. For me, the biggest challenge in higher ed is all of us as taxpayers, we contribute, and I always test people, and everyone always thinks I'm lying, we contribute $175 billion each year in grants and loans. It's a massive investment. And it's all based upon inputs. None of it's based upon outcomes. So it's all based upon enrollment. And we have 7,000 institutions of higher education. Some are amazing, some are horrific. Some graduate, almost every student coming in with a Pell Grant, some graduate students in the single digits. And for me, I worry less about the loan than I do about whether you get that diploma. If you get that degree, pretty good odds you're gonna, I'll come back, there's one caveat there, but you're probably gonna be in good shape. It's when you have the loan and no paper to show for it that you're in a worse financial position than when you started. So we tried and pushed back, honestly, both from the left and from the right, but for that massive investment. So to be clear, I'd like to see a lot more money go to universities where it's not just about access, but it's around completion. It's not around exclusion, it's around inclusion. And
to drive accountability.
Because the goal is not to go to college, the goal is to graduate. I think most people in this room, they graduate from college. And some universities have shown no interest, no creativity, no sense of urgency, no passion for improving completion rates. Why are we funding them? And you're seeing more and more charter networks and others start to steer kids towards certain schools and away from others. I'll be very honest, when I ran Chicago Public Schools, we got a lot of colleges in Chicago. Some are fantastic, some are horrific. And we started very intentionally telling kids, not that we would prohibit you from going here, but we really don't think you need to go to this school. Because kids that look like you don't come out the back end. And so districts can do it, charter networks can do it. You got to build your database. It's not that hard to figure that out. But we as taxpayers should demand, I think, that more money go to universities that are helping young people complete, and less money should go to places that aren't serious about it. And until we talk in education generally about outcomes, higher ed, K-12, early childhood as well, we're feeding the beast. We're not actually getting things better. So that's my biggest regret, that we were able to shift almost, we did some creative stuff, but it's on the margins. In terms of the massive public investment, it was all based upon inputs when we came in, and it's still all based upon inputs today.
Do you think that college for all is a bad goal, is a misguided, is the word I was searching for, goal?
So all these things in education, I'm always, for me the debates are so dysfunctional, I'm always a both and guy. So it's charters or traditional schools. I just want more good schools. I don't care what they look like, what their name is. So I want more good charter schools, I want more good traditional schools. I want less bad charters, I want less bad traditional schools. I think the goal of having every kid learning beyond high school, yes, we have to have that. How many of us are getting good jobs with a high school diploma today? Almost nobody. If you drop out, you're basically condemned to poverty and social failure. Now, what does that learning look like? It could be a 4-year university, it could be a 2-year community college, it could be trade, technical, vocational training, it could be national service, it could be military service, but some form of learning, some form of education beyond high school has to be the goal. I'll take the blame or the credit. Chicago's the first city, and I pushed the mayor on this, to say that every high school graduate has to have a post-secondary plan. And it's one thing to mandate, it's another to make it real. But just to say we're graduating students from high school and they're going to be fine in the world, we're kidding ourselves. Again, we're part of the problem. And final thing I'll say is that I don't think we should ever track kids. Like in Germany, some other countries, they have great vocational programs, China, but like at 13, you were told you're going the vocational route or you're going the higher ed route. I don't want to do that. I just want to give kids multiple great options and let them figure out their passion, let them figure out which way they want to go. That's not for anyone else to decide. But if every young person had, a couple, 2, 3 great options, and figure out what's the best fit for them at this, as an 18-year-old, that would be huge. That would be huge. Does it have to be all before year? Of course not.
So do you think that we're using the right rubrics to evaluate the effectiveness of higher education institutions?
We don't evaluate their effectiveness. There are no rubrics.
So you saw the recent debate with WGU?
Yeah,
and the
no.
whole
So again, so we can go through. That's accreditation.
Yep.
Accreditation is broken. We can talk about that. But again, you look at U.S. News and World Report that drives so much
Right.
of this, and a huge percent of that is based upon what percent of kids you exclude, not what percent you include. So you gain prestige, you gain status by not opening your door, and finding ways, again, on campus, finding ways virtually with technology. I'm a huge fan of what Arizona State is doing. Southern New Hampshire, I'm a huge fan of. They're reaching lots of populations that will never step foot on their campus, but they are reducing exclusivity and increasing inclusivity. And the goal is not just to be more inclusive, the goal is to have those young people graduate, complete. So whether it's accreditation, which is absolutely antiquated and doesn't make any sense, whether it's, for me, you always got to follow the money, whether it's our $175 billion, it just goes wherever kids go, regardless of outputs. We are not serious about accountability and metrics at the higher ed side.
I want to talk about broken promises.
And let me, sorry, just I always want to be clear, because sometimes people are, like for me, the goal is not just graduation rates, because one way to increase your graduation rates is to work with more privileged kids, more advantaged kids.
Right.
It's what are you doing to, Franklin and Marshall in the past couple of years has tripled the number of Pell recipients they are serving. Franklin and Marshall's Pell recipients are actually graduating at slightly higher rates than the traditional student body. That's a stunning stat.
It is.
So for me, it's, again, not just absolute, but who are you serving? Are you increasing first-gen college? Are you increasing minority? Are you increasing Pell Grant, English language learners? And then not just increasing their access, but increasing their completion rates. So Arizona State has seen all of their completion rates go up, but they will tell you their Native American, while much higher than most, is still nowhere near as high as it should. And they have to continue to work on closing that equity gap. So for me, it's always not absolute. It's what progress are you making, and what's the degree of challenge you're taking on? What are you willing to take on?
At the reception a few moments ago, someone stopped me and said that the country that they were from invested 1% of GDP into public education. And I remember when I lived in California that one of the promises that we made is that if students, high school students, maintained a certain GPA, they would be guaranteed access to a state university. And that has broken down as more international students come to our institutes of higher education paying full fare because the pressure is on, the financial pressure is on. What do you think is going to happen in 25 years?
I wish I knew, boy. Hopefully we don't have nuclear war in the next couple of years.
Yeah, right. I said I wasn't going to talk about that, but...